Today we are sitting down again with State Representative Doyle Heffley. And Representative Heffley, today we're going to be talking about election law and some last-minute changes that deal with elections. Can you start off by telling us what happened with the governor and voter registration? This seems to be a kind of sudden change.
Yeah, it is a hot topic right now. I mean, Governor Shapiro, by executive order, has changed how people register to vote when applying for the license. The Motor Voter Act is a federal law that allows people to register to vote when they go for their driver's license. And right now, you have to check the box yes or no if you want to register to vote. So if you know you're not eligible to register to vote, maybe you're here on a visa, maybe you had a criminal history that you're not eligible to vote, you would know to check no. And now this new system is automatically going to register everybody right off the bat. It's automatic registration. I think it's a solution in search of a problem. Nobody has ever contacted my office and said it's too hard to register to vote. You can pick up your smartphone, just go onto the Department of State's website, click on elections, and you can register to vote right there. It's very easy. There's a link pretty much through every state agency to register to vote.
And certainly, and you said enacting legislation, and that's really a problem here, is that we didn't enact legislation. No. This was a fiat.
Yeah.
And that really throws the whole process into question, and that's what makes people question elections and the whole electoral process. Talk to us about that.
What the governor has done here has just created another scenario where people are going to question the integrity of the elections. Look, back in Act 77, the mail-in ballots, was passed in 2019. Then was challenged in the courts, and then September 27, 2020, less than 2 months before one of the biggest presidential elections, which was a very hotly contested election, very divided nation, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out and rewrote Act 77. So everything that the legislature had put in as safeguards, like take something as simple as a signature match. When you go in to register to vote right now, your first time you vote, you have to show your ID. And then after that, you don't have to show your ID. I support voter ID throughout. But they actually threw out the signature match. So when you sign a mail-in ballot, that's your signature. When you go to vote, you sign your signature in the book. That's a form of ID. They check your signature. So now you can't challenge a signature match. Why would the courts, when rewriting Act 77, throw out the signature match and then create something called drop boxes, which were never in the legislative package? Plus, there was a clause in that legislation, a severability clause. So it couldn't, if you change any part of the law, it threw out the entire law. The courts just didn't obey that at all. So what that did was it really questioned the integrity and the security of the election in 2020, to the point where you had riots, right? Because people don't trust our election process here in the state of Pennsylvania. And that was done by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Now, fast forward, now we're coming up 2023, coming into 2024. We have a U.S. Senate seat up. We have the Attorney General's position up, which are huge positions in the state of Pennsylvania. But also you have another presidential year. And what Shapiro just did by executive fiat, just issuing an executive order, not coming to the legislature and say, hey, I think we need to change something, can work through the legislative process, just sign an executive order for automatic voter registration. That just puts more doubt in everybody's mind about the integrity of the election, and I'm questioning it myself.
Not just integrity, not just doubt. It seems like it's one of those things where people don't really know how it should be done. Mm-hmm. And so people are getting away with sliding things through in nefarious ways. How should this process be done? What does the law prescribe for changing voter law, election law? How is the process supposed to be achieved? And why is the legislature so important in that?
Well, last session, we passed a number of election laws. And how it works is the state government committee has hearings. So they held the hearings, and they brought in people from that work in election code. They brought in people that run elections, and they sat and listened to them. And they brought in national groups, Democrat and Republican groups, to sit down and talk about how can we better secure our election, make it an easier process. Those hearings, they had many hearings. They drafted legislation that dealt with a whole caveat of issues, from as simple as updating the voter rolls. That's something that should be done all the time. auditing every election. There should be an auditing of a percentage of ballots in each county. We are a commonwealth. As part of our commonwealth, the counties run the elections. The counties certify the vote. Your election board in the county, or generally your county commissioners, they certify the vote from the elections, and then they turn that over to the Department of State. So the counties have a huge role in this. So listening to all the groups that are running the elections, and then putting forth meaningful legislation that is going to be able to pass in the House, pass in the Senate, and get the governor's signature. That's how you change the election code. It shouldn't be done by just on a whim. And some would say, with the political ambitions of our current governor, that this was somewhat self-serving. To want to create a system to make it automatic voter registration.
And to speak again of motives, there's another piece of legislation moving right now, an effort to change the primary date here in Pennsylvania, move it up, make our state a little bit more relevant as far as primaries go. Once again, not a whole lot of people disagree that Pennsylvania deserves to be a little bit more relevant, but the timing is suspect. The reasoning for doing it is suspect, and when things seem to be, even if they aren't politically motivated, when they seem to be politically motivated, that makes it all just seem dirty and ugly to the people. How do we kind of put the brakes on these kinds of things? How do we make sure we're addressing this without crossing those lines?
Yeah, I mean, the Senate bill that was passed as far as moving up the primary election in the state of Pennsylvania for this year, that was introduced a while ago. This should have been done a while ago. I mean, you have folks that haven't even declared whether they're running, right, for the elections next year for like positions as Auditor General or Senate, and now they're moving the primary date up. And I think it's just going to once again make our whole system suspicious. People are going to be questioning it. Why would you move the date now? This bill had been out here for quite some time, and now it seems like the House Democrats are pushing right now. Here we are in October. To move the primary date. We've already talked to the counties. This is going to be a huge expense on county governments.
Replaying ballots, all this kind of thing.
Yeah, and we know that we have a lot of issues right now with our elections. I mean, from the drop boxes and the mail-in balloting and election integrity questions. So I would say if we want to move the primary date, we should at least put an amendment on there, and there will be amendments offered for voter ID. To make sure that everybody's going to show your ID when you go to vote. I think the majority of Pennsylvanians agree with that. You have to show your ID for anything that you do. If you want to buy a pack of Swisher Sweets at a pharmacy or at your local Rite Aid, and you may know the teller behind the counter, they're going to ask to see your license because you're buying a tobacco product. If you go to the hospital, if you register for any kind of public benefits, you have to show your license. And if you don't have an ID, the state will give you one free. So I think, how can the governor say that when you're applying for an ID, you can automatically register to vote, but you're not allowed to ask that person to show their ID when you go to vote? And that makes no sense at all. So, yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to move that primary date, I'm not opposed to it. I just think doing it in the 11th hour is just going to cause a whole bunch of issues. Right now, we know we're going to have a hotly contested presidential race in 2024. Right? We already know how it's setting up, how it's going to be. The last thing we want to do is put any more doubt in the voters' minds that this election is in some way not up to what it should be.